You have a voice for radio.
I have a face for radio.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Post Millennial podcast. We're talking politics today with Rick Peterson, who's running to become the next leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. So welcome to Montreal, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Nico, pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So first question, what qualifies you to become the leader of the Conservative Party?
30 years in the Conservative trenches, working as a fundraiser, a volunteer, a campaign organizer, Nico. I am a Western Canadian who's fluently bilingual from the business community. So coming into a leadership race where the Canadian electorate in October gave our party a clear signal that it's time for change, our campaign represents a very strong focus on policy, determined to change the direction of the party to focus on the future of Canada rather than focus on the past, on issues which are largely irrelevant to most Canadians, such as who's a red Tory, who's a blue Tory. So I'm the voice of the future of the party coming from Western Canada and looking forward to bringing strong policy platforms that are going to put us into a position to form the next government.
And you have quite an exotic resume as well, if you don't mind me saying. You've done an awful lot outside of politics. I believe you've lived in a few countries, which is why your French is so excellent.
Thank you.
And could you tell us all a bit about what you've done?
You know, I'm a kid from Northern Alberta. I was a kid from Northern Alberta, played hockey at the University of Alberta, and got a chance to go to Europe and play hockey in France. I lived in France for 10 years, Nico. And after a couple of years of playing hockey in the south of France, I did a graduate degree in economics and political science in Paris and lived in France for 10 years. My wife and I moved to Vancouver and lived in Vancouver for 30 years until 2 years ago when I moved to Edmonton. So it's an interesting perspective. My first career, I was a journalist. Was an editorial writer with the Edmonton Journal during the energy wars back in the 1980s. And in Europe, I was very fortunate. I worked with Southern News, and I was their correspondent in Paris, traveling all over Europe and covering everything from World Cup skiing to the revolution in Iran to all kinds of things having to do with the European economic community. So very lucky to have witnessed a lot of different moments in history that are very important.
Right. And in 2017, you ran in the Conservative leadership election as well. You finished 11th out of 30 with less than 1% of the vote. And then after that, you went to Alberta in a nomination, which you didn't subsequently win.
Right.
If precedent is anything to go by, it seems unlikely that you're going to win. What's changed?
Oh no, I'm going to say that this has given me an absolutely strong advantage, and I'll tell you why. In 2017, I was actually 12th out of 14. It was very difficult for any candidates to get airtime. So if you look at the results, the first round voting results, half of the candidates got less than 5%. Strong MPs who had strong careers were at the bottom of the tables with me. So I was in pretty good company. The other interesting thing is that Maxime Bernier very nearly won the leadership race. And I received more number 2 votes. People who put Maxime Bernier as their number 1 pick, I was the near unanimous choice to be their number 2. So to turn that around, Nico, the second place finisher, half the party wanted him to be their leader, but they chose me right behind him. So that's a strong base. And we're seeing a lot of people who did not follow Maxime Bernier out the door are staying here. They're with us. They're part of our campaign team. We have a campaign team of 85 people right now today across Canada growing, and I would say fully half of them are people that worked on the ground for Maxime Bernier. When we moved to Alberta, we moved into Rona Ambrose's riding the 1st of September, and the nomination race was scheduled for November. The day we moved there, the by-election was called by the Prime Minister, and it was advanced way earlier than we had expected. So I was on the ballot, but we didn't get a chance to campaign. And Dane Lloyd won the nomination, and he's a strong Conservative. He's got long roots in the party and in the riding, and Dane Lloyd is an excellent MP. So he's a good friend and somebody who I work for and support. So to your point, Nico, the leadership race in 2017 taught me a lot. It taught me how important the membership takes leadership races. It also taught me the importance of policy. Policy that I brought forth in 2017 has not changed. 0 corporate income tax, 15% flat tax, driving the economy. The distinguishing factor in this race so far is our campaign is the only one talking policy. And to Maxime Bernier's credit, he was a strong policy platform as well, too. And he did very well. So we're going to continue to do what we did back in 2017, advance bold policy ideas, and very happy with the way it's gone so far.
You do have lots of interesting policy ideas, and I think you should be commended for that.
Thank you.
And we'll certainly get onto that later. But I was wondering, why do you think so many people who previously supported Maxime Bernier and indeed worked for Maxime Bernier now choose you?
The important thing in this leadership race is the future of Canada. So we are looking at 10 years in the future, and I've said it ever since I started in this race. There has never been a better time to be a 30 or a 40-year-old Canadian than right now. I'm in the private sector. Duncan, who's sitting over here in the corner with me, and I have 4 other partners, and we have a very privileged position, Nico, in that we're working with the very best companies in Canada who are in the technology, in the biotech, in the medical sectors, in the environmental, in the agriculture sectors. We work with the best companies in Canada who are growing. So we see where they're going. We see what they're doing. It's like Wayne Gretzky says, we are looking where the puck's going. And undeniably, after 30 years in the capital markets business, we're on the cusp, I believe, of explosive growth in Canada, right? So I'm coming to this leadership race saying we have an opportunity for the Conservative Party to be catalysts for this explosive growth. We have an opportunity to focus on concrete measures that are going to help young men and women, the age of everybody here in the studio, to make Canada the global leader in growth and technology and the ultimate place to live for the next decade. So the people who are attracted to our campaign, some of them are coming from Mr. Bernier, some of them are coming from elsewhere, but our party has to look at the future. Our party has been inward looking with small measures that I think have been more electorally induced. We're looking to change the future of Canada. Right. Our policies are looking to enable the young entrepreneurs. Give you an example. We're in Montreal today. 5 years ago, who ever heard of Lightspeed? Right? Who ever heard of Lightspeed? 8, 6, 7 years ago, Shopify was an idea, right? Element AI right here is a real, the artificial intelligence. You guys are leading it here in Montreal. Out west, we got a company called Skip the Dishes, right? Which has just disrupted a whole home delivery of food business. So the underlying factor of our campaign is we want to be a bold catalyst for what we call creative disruption. We want disruptors to come. We want people who have bold ideas that are going to change the way that business has been done in the past, usher in the new areas, and create wealth at the same time. So as opposed to the Liberal Party, for example, you guys are in the media business. I mean, look how you're disrupting the media business by doing these podcasts, by combining what you're doing online with radio. The Liberals want to put $600 million to sustain old media companies that haven't changed, right? And that's wrong. That's wrong. We need to let the entrepreneurs build their businesses, and the way we do it is our 0 corporate income tax. We talk about corporations. Well, did you know that there's 1.2 million corporations, or people paying, there's 1.2 million businesses paying corporate tax in Canada. But those businesses are 98% are small and medium businesses, less than 100 employees, right? So instead of paying corporate income tax to the federal government, what they're going to do is take that money and buy new equipment, hire people, rent out studios, do innovative things. And our goal is to create the conditions that allow disruptors like you are to thrive and to come here and to be contributing to where we think this country is going to go.
You spoke a little bit about last election. Why do you think Andrew Scheer failed to win? If it was indeed like having a breakaway on an empty nest and missing it, what went wrong?
Andrew increased our seat count, right, from 99 to 120. So keep in mind, we're not far. We're not far from creating a majority government. We're not far. And I think Andrew deserves a ton of credit. As Napoleon says, victory has 1,000 fathers, defeat is an orphan. So don't shortchange what Andrew did. And I campaigned beside Andrew Scheer for 8 months in the leadership campaign. He's a strong conservative, and his values are strong, and what he represents for values are a core part of our family. So the area that Andrew may have come in short with is here in Quebec, right? His ability to connect with people in this province. Language may have been an issue, but people in Quebec understand it's not just language, it's do you understand, do you feel the values of us? And the difficulties that Andrew may have had in the campaign here translated into gains for the Bloc Québécois, for Yves-François Blanchet. So do not underestimate the fact that Andrew Scheer has put us within striking distance of a majority government. I want you to know that, right? He's put us within striking distance of a majority government. And as the leader of the Conservative Party, I'm the only one of the candidates who will be able to take that platform that Andrew's built for us and to finish the job with a majority government that resonates in all parts of the country.
So you're the man to bridge Western Canada with Ontario and Quebec.
I'm a fluently bilingual Westerner who lives, has family and businesses in Quebec, does business in Ontario, and we're going to be announcing tomorrow morning, we'll give you guys a scoop, our first endorsement will be coming from a very high-profile parliamentarian from Nova Scotia. So that tells you about what we are doing in Atlantic Canada. Duncan and I and our partners out in Atlantic Canada, we do business in Atlantic Canada. We're helping companies invest, create jobs in Atlantic Canada. I'm going out to Halifax tomorrow, if the weather holds up, and take part in an event for the Nova Scotia Progressive Conservative Party. And I'm going to be the only person on the stage that is significantly helping the economy of Nova Scotia now, right? Creating jobs, bringing money, and bringing capital into the economy. So we're forward-looking, we're not backward-looking, Nico.
How would you rate the French of the other candidates so far in this election, leadership election?
On a scale of 1 to 10?
Go on.
I don't think anybody else on the stage who I know is going to be in the race is higher than a 4.
Really? Mm-hmm. What would you rate Peter MacKay?
4.
And then O'Toole Gladue?
I'm sorry?
O'Toole and Mrs. Gladue?
3.5.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. So both, speaking of Mrs. Gladue, both Erin O'Toole and Marilyn have pledged to scrap the 600 million media bailouts. You spoke a bit about that earlier. Would you pledge to do the same?
Absolutely. Marilyn is a very, very strong conservative. She was one of the earliest, strongest supporters for Andrew Scheer. In fact, she even sat in for Andrew in some of the debates in 2017, is a very strong conservative. And I'm thrilled to have her in the race. It's good to have a woman in the race. And her background is tremendously strong. In fact, I tweeted something that I now regret was smiling about it, but I said, I bet I'm the only leadership candidate that has a possession and acquisition license, which is a firearms license, right?
Of course.
And I put it up, but guess what? Marilyn came back, said not only does she have a PAL, she's also got it for the specialized restricted license as well too. So I said, Marilyn, good for you. You got me on that one, right? So she's a strong woman, strong conservative. She's going to be strong in the race. But yes, I absolutely agree on the bailout. Having worked in the media, I know exactly what needs to be done. Nico, here's something. Did you know that the subscription, the New York Times and the Washington Post and the larger U.S. American newspapers have never been more profitable than they are now?
Really?
Mm-hmm. When Jeff Bezos came into the newspaper business, I think he hired like 1,000 editorial people. People will pay for content. People will pay for content. I subscribe, and I'm a news junkie, but I still have 4 newspapers that come to my home. But when I'm traveling, I have subscribed for probably 8 or 10. I will pay for good content, right? And I think the media in the future is going to be driven by good content. People will pay for good content. So to have the Liberals come in and say, well, let's give $600 million and we'll figure out where it goes and we'll let these old models stand up, I don't think there will be anybody on the leadership stage that will agree with that, right? So again, creative disruption. When the media industry disrupts and blows up, good things come from it, right? Trying to underpin a weak old model, throwing good money after bad is just not going to work, but that's what the Liberals do. And that's the way that Liberals spend our hard-earned tax dollars.
What about the CBC? We're seeing a public broadcaster that is losing money, that's losing viewership, that increasingly asks for more taxpayer money to fund it, that no longer wants to play as much Canadian content. Would you look to reform it?
One of the things I love about our campaign is we have ideas that bubble up from everybody on the campaign, right? They're not just mine. And so Duncan Roy and a group of people who think like him called up an idea that I think is a phenomenal one. I don't think we need, in fact I know, we don't need the CBC covering local traffic, local weather, local sports, and everything else that's covered by Global and all the other private sector ones. But a model for a public broadcaster that I think is a strong one is the BBC or public radio in the US. But let's look at the BBC. If we're looking at a global environment and we're looking at Canada being a global disruptor, I would love to shift the mandate for the CBC and say, shut down all your big office in Vancouver and that big studio, and same thing in Montreal and Toronto. Let's get a smaller budget, but let's turn your focus to become a global. Why don't you take a mission that is to talk about Canada to the world, but also tell Canada about things in the world that matter to us?
And they don't do that currently?
Small amounts. I mean, I'm in the CBC studio in Vancouver and I look across 3 football fields of reporters covering local news. I don't think we need to do that. So the mandate of the CBC should be to do something different. And the unequivocal thing is we cannot have the CBC compete with the private sector for advertising dollars when you're getting money coming from the government, right?
Yes. You've come into this leadership contest with, as I said, lots of interesting policy ideas, and you've spoken about some of them here today. In particular, and what I think is perhaps the most eyebrow-raising of these, is your plan to eliminate corporation tax in its entirety, and then to introduce a flat tax on personal income of 15%.
That's right.
Now, I just wanted to clarify something. Will that 15% be across all tax brackets?
It'll be progressive up to $24,000, and then once you're at the $24,000 level, 15 all across. Flat.
All across the tax bracket?
Yep. Yeah.
How is that fair for, people who earn millions like yourself to pay the same?
No, I don't earn millions. Let's just stop there, Nico. I do not earn millions.
Sorry, forgive me. But let's say millionaires, unlike yourself, how is it fair for them to pay 15% tax rate and then for somebody to pay or to earn, $25,000 the same amount? Surely that's not equitable.
I have a better question for you.
Of course.
So let me ask you this. A tax on income is a tax on your effort, your success, and your achievements, right? Right? You get a salary for the work you're putting in, the effort that you're putting in, and the success that you have. So why should it be that the more you work, the more you're successful, and the more you make, a progressively large portion of your dollars get taken away from you? Think about that. So if the concept that's clear is that the more you tax, the less you're going to get of, right? The more you tax something, it's only normal. The more you tax something, the less that the tax will return. So think about it this way. If you make $30,000 a year, or then you go to 50,000, then you go to 60, then you go to 80. At each level, your amount that's being taken away is progressively higher. So there will get to a point when you think, well, what's the, all I'm doing for working is paying more tax on it. So why don't we do this? Why don't we take that flat rate, and the more that you earn, the more you get to keep? So the next question that's going to come to me is, yeah, but the rich will get richer. Well, if you think that people who make more money let it sit in their bank accounts at 0.5%, you're wrong. Now, I'll tell you why. Today in Canada, fully half of the households in Canada are within $500 of not meeting month end. Think about that. Within $500 of meeting month end. So Justin Trudeau talks about a middle class tax cut or helping the middle class. The middle class right now is strapped. The middle class in Canada is strapped. RBC Dominion Securities puts out a research report that says most Canadians are within $500 of not making their ends meet. So our 15% tax plan, you know what that does? That takes that extra amount of money right into the pockets of the middle class. And if you're in a higher tax bracket, I don't know anybody in a higher tax bracket who's going to let their money sit at 0.3% in some bank right now. no matter what they do with the money, it will engender an action or an activity that produces tax revenue. They will be purchasing more things and paying GST. They will be paying themselves a dividend, so they will be paying taxes on the dividends. They will be investing in capital equipment. They will be going on a holiday. They will be doing everything that they do will be engendering tax consequence. So people, especially CBC television interviewers, like to come at me and they say, but look at the deficit. The deficit's going to raise. Well, if you're going to introduce a tax cut, the tax cut is one side of it, but what's going to happen with that money? That money is going to come back into the economy and it's going to fuel the economy. I'm standing here today in front of you saying that what we hear and we see from people in the private sector is they would love that tax cut not to sit on it in their bank account, but to put it to work in the economy. So that's the argument behind that, and that's why we're going to do really well in this race.
Well, there's another end to that question, and that's how will Canada afford to eliminate this huge amount of income it gets from taxes with the social infrastructure it has currently? There must be tax cuts, or not necessarily tax cuts. There must be cuts on the social infrastructure if this is ever to happen.
That's your opinion.
Well, is it not?
Well, so give me an example.
Well, the roads in Canada, for instance.
I'm sorry, the what?
The roads.
The roads.
Of course. It's a massive country. You're proposing to take us to tax rates similar to that of Singapore or Hong Kong. It's enormous amounts of money to repair them, to maintain them. And let's talk about healthcare as well. You know, the federal government subsidises provincial governments. If you were to take, I think, almost 15%, at least from the highest tax bracket, away from federal income, then it's going to be very difficult for the government to then pay for healthcare.
So thank you for the introduction into another strong policy plank that we have, which we haven't fully outlined, but which you will be hearing about. We are going to be, healthcare spending is going to take 50 cents out of every dollar. We're going to be introducing the idea of a crown agency looking out for healthcare spending. Instead of it coming into a big, large mass of Canada Healthcare, we're going to introduce a crown agency platform, which makes more efficient allocation of money in the private sector healthcare, more choices, more jobs. So infrastructure right now, the Trudeau Infrastructure Bank, they don't even know how to spend the money. The infrastructure bank has got people leaving it because the money isn't being allocated properly. Right? So when people say, oh, we need all this, we do need that. So if we're cutting corporate tax and we're cutting personal income tax, it's to make a more efficient use of money that's going to be available for all these things. And we are in, Nico. So here's something that we have to keep in mind. Do you remember when Justin Trudeau ran in 2015 on that little, was it a small little deficit? Well, that deficit has now come in to swallow him. But we're in a precarious situation right now. We're in about the 10th year of an unparalleled economic run fueled by cheap money and global strength in the markets, especially in the U.S. At some point, we will swing into an economic downturn, which is inevitable. And maybe something will happen that's unexpected, like maybe one of our largest, if not the largest trading partner shuts its doors because of a virus. Right. So when the economic cycle does slow down, what is going to happen to a country that is shoveling money out the back door and doesn't know how to get it out fast enough? Have you read John Ibbotson's book on Trudeau?
I haven't.
Well, you should. Because there's a chapter in there that shows how desperately they're trying to shovel money out the back door and they don't even know where it's going. You should read that book. Everybody should read that book. It's a great book, right? It's a profile of the Prime Minister. But what is absolutely frightening about it is they have no idea where that money is going. They can't shovel it out the back door fast enough because they want to do more of it in the next budget. That cannot stop. So right now, the Liberals say our debt to GDP numbers, right? Debt on the top, GDP. We're fine. We're spending money, but, our debt is, well, what happens if that GDP number all of a sudden falls, as it will when it goes down? So your debt to GDP goes out of control. So I am very, very concerned that Canadians who are within $500 of not meeting their month end, when our economy slows down or goes into an inevitable slowdown, which is the cyclical nature of the business, we're going to be in a hard time. We're going to be in trouble. So, Nico, it's a roundabout way of saying that you cannot ignore the need for strong fiscal responsible government. And we're not getting it with the Trudeau. We're not getting it with any Liberal government. We've never had it with the Liberal government. And this is why in 2000 or this year, after I become the leader on June 27th, starting in June 28th, we are going to be giving a clear, outlined, fully costed platform to Canadians that will allow us to go into an election right away and to seek a mandate for some stronger, smarter economic growth and fiscal responsibility.
So you pledge not to make any cuts to social services?
I'm pledging to make whatever decisions are needed to put Canada back on track.
That's a bit vague.
Well, of course it's vague because I don't see the numbers and we have to cost everything out, Nico.
Then how can you make a proposal like you're going to eliminate corporation tax without having the numbers?
How can the Prime Minister say he's only going to have a small budget deficit when it turns out to be 10 times that amount?
Well, yes, it was during a leadership election. It was also proven to be wrong.
We're putting together a very strong policy proposal that we're ready to defend, and we're getting lots of support for it, Nico. So we're not too concerned about that.
Right. The last point of this particular policy, I think, as you said, we need to...
Which policy? Sorry.
Of the tax cuts.
Which one?
Both, the 15% and the corporation tax.
Okay.
In this election, the Conservative Party needs to persuade people who voted for the Bloc Québécois, people who voted for the Liberal Party. With your economic policies, do you think we'll be able to persuade people who are somewhat sceptical about Conservatives in the economy?
It's a very good question, Nico. The actual decision on election day is an amalgamation of a number of factors. Some people may vote just because of one factor, but at the end of the day, the preponderant factor is likely economic questions. The second factor is how comfortable are they that this leader thinks like they do, has similar values, and that they can trust. So we're extremely confident in Quebec and in Atlantic Canada that the message of fiscal responsibility, but at the same time, the other elements which come into our platform. Our platform is a completely transparent, open platform that brings a number of elements into the equation. So this is when I want to bring in the other elements of it with environmental policy. We're going to be putting a price on carbon. We're going to be openly in favor of the LGBTQ community. If you put our strong fiscal responsibility and continue to support it with these other elements of what we're bringing to the table, that's a message that we know and are confident will resonate in Quebec and Atlantic Canada. It already does in the West. So as the leader of the party, my goal is to do two things, is to come up with some ideas that at the end of the day, it's going to be our membership which decides policy, as we've seen on Jerusalem, right? Our membership has policy conventions that the leader listens to and has to take into account when they are developing policy during the election campaign. So our focus for the next, until the next election as the leader, is to put together a group of policy proposals that resonate on all these levels, but the leading element of it is the tax cut to stimulate the economy.
Right. On the note of Jerusalem, where would you put the Canadian embassy? Would you move it immediately to Jerusalem?
I would follow what the membership voted, and that is to absolutely have it in Jerusalem, right? I mean, our membership voted clearly on that in the last policy convention. And I come up through the party, through the policy ranks, and as an EDA member. And when the EDA members go to a policy convention and they discuss it and they vote on it, I mean, you cannot ignore the wishes of the membership. Well,
so far, I've asked this question to, I think, 3 separate leadership candidates, and all of them haven't answered it properly, which is almost certainly my fault. But
what's the proper answer, Nico? Sorry.
Well, I'm going to give it another shot here.
Okay.
Who do you think is the strongest candidate, aside from yourself, in this election?
Rick Peterson.
Well, aside from yourself, who do you think is most competitive against you? Who worries you?
We don't know who's all going to be in the race. And so I tell you what I'll do is after March 27th, I'll answer that question after March 27th when we see who's in the race, okay? Is that fair?
I'm looking forward to it. What's your message for Conservative members watching this right now?
Be bold.
Be bold.
Be bold. Be bold. Be bold in your future. I'm bullish on Canada. This is just the best place to be. You guys are in the best spot to be for the next 10 years. Right? My children are so lucky. Duncan's children, they're in their late 20s, 30s. You have the world in front of you right here in Canada right now. Grab it, run with it, be bold. So my role as the Prime Minister of Canada is to clear the way, to let you go and be bold and take risks. Canada has been always built by risk takers, right? Right? The first people from France or England or even, going back 400, 500 years, the First Nations groups who were here saw people come over and take risk, and coming over here in a ship for fur trades, is risky, right? The first settlers in Canada was risky, but Canadians don't shy away from risk. Risk is an opportunity. So what we have to do is we have to make an environment where people are bold and willing to take the risk to try something new. And I'm saying to the Conservative Party, be bold. Be as bold as those people who are creating this future in Canada. Because if we're not, if we turn around and debate about who's a red Tory, who's a blue Tory, who did this, who did that, we're going to all be behind the 8 ball.
Rick Peterson, thank you so much for coming.
Nico, thank you. Good job, man.
Perfect. Marvellous.